Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Brianna, and I am delighted to have you with us here. We know that your time is a precious, precious thing, and so I am so excited to see that so many of you have chosen to spend your time with us here learning about cats, learning about Trap-Neuter-Return, and what we can do to help our community save even more cats' lives. In my experience, this is the highest registration that we've ever had. Sorry, I'm just making sure we are having no audio difficulties. Okay, so this is the highest registration that we've ever seen for our webinars. And I am just delighted to have so many folks with us from all around the United States. I see we have someone tuning in from Portugal. We've had registrations from Argentina, Spain, South Africa, all of it. So wherever you are, whether you're tuning into the live session or you're viewing this at a later time as a recording, we are delighted that you are here. So without further ado, so as I said, my name is Brianna. I have been with Alley Cat Allies for 6 years. And in my role, I have had various responsibilities within community engagement and outreach, but largely I get to do fun things like travel for conferences, and so I get to exhibit and speak on behalf of Alley Cat Allies. I also help organize our workshops, and I have gone on different trips to meet with shelter and rescue groups. I work with our Feral Friends Network, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I even assist with our cat help desk, lots of different fun things. I work with our Global Cat Day campaign. And so through all of that work, it means that I get to talk to so many people around the country who are helping cats. I get to hear about the cool things that they're doing to implement new and innovative life-saving protocols in their hometown. And I also get to hear about their challenges, and I get to talk to them about what it is that they're facing and how it is that Alley Cat Allies can help. And so I have the fun job of being able to really hear what people need and then provide for that need with the resources and information from Alley Cat Allies. So I love what I do, all of that to say, and I hope that you guys will enjoy this presentation. And before we dig in, I should say, I do just want to go over a few little housekeeping notes. Now, I hope you all are able to hear me right now. Be sure that your speakers are connected, the volume is up. We are going to be here today. This is a 90-minute presentation. And so I used to try to cram all of this information into about an hour, and I just realized that we have way too much. So we are going to be here for a 90-minute presentation today. We're going to share a lot of information, a lot of resources. So I hope that you are ready to take a few notes. I have attached just a few handouts in your GoToWebinar toolbar. If you look, you'll see a section called handouts. Those are PDFs that you are welcome to download, print at your leisure as you like. They are resources for you. And so I will also be pointing out various websites or various places on our website where you can access this information as well. So like I said, we have a lot to go through. If you feel like you've missed anything, please do not worry. We are going to be recording this presentation, and it will be available to you in a follow-up email. And so after our presentation concludes in a couple hours, you will receive an email with the link to this recording, and then you will also be able to access it anytime online at alleycat.org/webinar. And that is actually our full library of webinar resources. So when you go there, you'll see a bunch of different topics. And let's say you are more interested in advocacy. We have a webinar, and you can view that at any time by clicking on that advocacy webinar and looking for the Watch This Webinar button. So whether it's advocacy or kitten care or animal control, all of that is there for you. So please do check it out. We have so much to offer. All right, so as we go through today, obviously you guys can hear me, but there's so many of you tuned in that I have all the attendees muted. That would be chaos. So instead, I'm asking you to use your questions box that you can see there on the GoToWebinar little screenshot that I have. You can type in your question, submit it to me, and if I can, I'll try to answer it through the presentation, or at the very least, we're going to line those questions up for the very end of the presentation. We will have some time for questions and answers at the very end. And then, of course, if you don't have, or if I'm not able to answer your question in real time, you can always go to alleycat.org/get-help. While I have you, I also want to mention this incredible resource, our Feral Friends Network. Now, this is a directory for anyone that needs any kind of help with cats that they're seeing outside. So whether it is someone that needs help trapping a cat in their backyard, or maybe you're looking for veterinary resources in your own community, or maybe you want to connect with someone that can help with a foster or an adoption process. We have all of those services listed out for you. People sign up and the list is searchable by zip code, which is extra convenient. That way, you know, whenever you pull that search, you're always going to find the people who are closest to home. So you can learn more about this incredible resource at alleycat.org/feralfriends, and you can also access the search from that site. So please do check it out. Even if you just want to connect and talk to someone who's doing this work, have a resource to turn to. You know, we all need to build those networks, build those relationships. And of course, it's a resource for anyone that needs help. And among the resources that we'll go over today, a lot of them are available for purchase from our shop. Our website has a lot of this information ready to download and print for free. You are welcome to it. But if you happen to want some of our posters or our kind of table-ready materials for a presentation you might be doing or an upcoming event, we have all of that on our website at alleycat.org/shop. Not to mention, you can always check out the sweet Alley Cat Allies swag. Get the latest gear. It's all online. Check it out. All right, so that's about enough of an intro. Let's go ahead and let's start talking about why we're really here today. And we can't talk about Trap-Neuter-Return and where we are now without first reflecting a bit. And we've been doing a lot of reflecting because, guys, this year is Alley Cat Allies' 30th anniversary. So we have officially been around for 30 years. Becky Robinson first founded the organization back in 1990. And since that time, we have been helping cats and communities all around the United States and all around the globe. And we're very excited. And to celebrate this, we are doing a series of conferences called our Every Kitty, Every City conferences. This is really a shameless plug because we are hosting our Every Kitty, Every City Florida conference this Friday. And so if you happen to be in the Orlando, Florida area and you are free on Friday, you can still head to everykitty.everycity.org and register, and you can join us for a full day of sessions talking about how we can all step up and implement the newest and the best practices for cats and sheltering. We're going to have a wide array of speakers, a wide array of topics. And so that's just a shameless plug. And it's really exciting that we're able to do things like this now because here we are 30 years later, but that's not where we started. Looking back, traveling back in time with me, if you will, back to 1990, when Becky Robinson first walked down that alley in Washington, D.C. and saw all these cats outside. She knew she wanted to help. She was involved in an animal welfare organization already, and so she thought there must be something, right? And so Becky Robinson started to call the animal groups she knew. She started to call the animal shelters and the animal control officers she knew, and no one had an answer for her. They all told her to accept the status quo, and that was simply that there's really nothing to be done, that animal control could trap and remove those cats, that they could be taken to an animal shelter where they would be killed. And that was it. That was the best resource. She called veterinarians. No veterinarian wanted to help. She looked for, you know, spay-neuter resources. I think the cheapest she said that she could find was $500 for a single spay and neuter. That was the best that she could find. There were no resources. There wasn't anyone to help. And when she brought up the option of having a non-lethal option, there was just resistance from across the animal welfare community. And so back in 1990, the landscape for cats was very different. But thankfully, Becky had the vision of a more compassionate future, a future where there would be something. What could we do for cats after all? And she had the ambition to figure out what that something was. And so that's when she started researching what people and places around the world were doing to help cats. And as it turned out, she found the solution over in the United Kingdom, and then she brought the practice of what we now know as Trap-Neuter-Return here to the States. And it was a very, very slow movement in the beginning. Caregivers were out there. There were people doing this incredible work, but everyone was isolated. The work was underground. People were disjointed. There wasn't a network connecting everybody, and there really wasn't the vernacular for it. TNR or Trap-Neuter-Return, that didn't really exist. It wasn't in the vocabulary. People didn't even know how to talk about what was happening. And so that's where Alley Cat Allies came in, and Becky and Alley Cat Allies gave that language, started spreading those best practices, talking about this crazy thing called TNR, and slowly, bit by bit, more organizations came on board, more and more groups started to support it. Even when the big humane groups started to push back, the movement continued to grow and grow and grow to today, when the big groups do support TNR, when we are seeing shelters and communities embrace more humane, non-lethal control methods for cats. And today we know that TNR is mainstream. From years ago when it didn't even exist to today, we have seen hundreds and hundreds of TNR ordinances and policies be put into place. We know there are thousands, and that's probably not even the right number, thousands upon thousands of grassroots, volunteer-led programs, people who are down in every part of their community. They're helping cats either through trapping, or maybe they do fostering, or maybe they're a kitten group. I mean, there weren't even resources for kittens. Think of all the changes and the positive things that have been put into place. And best of all, TNR is known to be sound public policy, and it's being implemented not just across the United States, but around the world. And so that's a lot of really, really great things to have happened in the past 30 years. To go from having nothing to being where we are today is certainly something to celebrate. But of course, we're not quite done yet. The cats still need an advocate. We do have resources. There are spay-neuter grants that are available now. There are shelters that offer humane deterrent banks. There's all sorts of creative things that we're seeing come into play, but we know it's not enough. We have more veterinary help than ever before. Veterinarians will offer community cat packages and spay-neuter clinics. Shelter medicine is becoming more and more popular. But we know it's not enough. We're seeing more life-saving for cats than ever before, but we know it's not enough. There's still more work to be done. We're getting there. We've seen the progress, and we see more progress every day. But in order to get to where we really want to go, we need you. And that's, again, why we're so excited to have you with us today, to have you tuning into the recording, whenever that might be. We value your time because we need your voice. The cats need you to speak up and correct the misinformation that's out there, to talk openly about Trap-Neuter-Return and colony care and all the exciting things that you're going to learn about and that you're doing. We want you to be a neighbor and share those lovely information with your neighbor who might seem a bit grumpy about the cats on the block. We want you to share this information and to be a resource for your community, because when we speak up for cats, we are advocating for them, and ultimately we're impacting their lives. And so I have a screenshot up here of a newer video that we've added to our YouTube channel, which, by the way, I highly recommend going to youtube.com/AlleyCatAllies, and you can see our full video library. We have so many great resources there, quick little videos. I think they're typically around 3 minutes or under, but this Helping Cats and People Coexist, that video is a great introduction to community relations and just what we're talking about here, about speaking up for cats, because the reality is we all know that there are cats out there and that someone needs to do something. Well, Tag, you're it. Thank you so much for volunteering, for stepping up, for being that resource. We all need to step up and do a little bit of something in order to get to where we want to be, because we know we can do it, but we can't do it alone. And so the more we can do to help even more cats, so much the better. And just remember that there are no small parts. And so some of us might think, oh, well, I'm just one person. I'm just trapping one cat in my backyard. But you know what? That matters. That makes a difference. Whether it's one cat, an entire colony, whether you're sharing information, or maybe you're reaching out to your animal control in your shelter to talk about humane policies. Maybe you're in the veterinary world or the shelter world. Whatever role you play, it all is making a difference. And so thanks again for everything that you are doing to help cats now and in the future. And as you go along, remember, Alley Cat Allies has your back. We've been in this since the beginning, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We step up when groups need our help. We have information, resources, talking points, tips, you name it. So remember, Alley Cat Allies is here as a resource, and thank you in advance for being an advocate. Now, after that little intro, I want to jump back to our topics for today, because we all know that you're here to talk about Trap-Neuter-Return. And so here's what we're going to go over. And without further ado, let's jump in. But first, I'd really like to know a bit more about who I have out here in the audience. And so I'm actually going to launch a poll. So this is interactive. I'm going to need you to click on your screen. Let's see, let's start with this one. All right, so do you currently feed or care for cats who live outside? Let's see what we got here. Now remember, you can click on your screen for this part. Looks like I have about half the folks clicked in. It's looking like 2/3 are saying yes, they have, or yes, they do care for cats outside already. And then we have about 1/3 who are saying no, not yet. You just wait, folks. I'm sure we can find some cats for you. I'm kidding, kind of. All right, go ahead and get those votes in if you haven't already. All right, yeah, holding strong at about 2/3 yes and 1/3 no. Okay, so we have some active caregivers. That's pretty great. One more question for you. And so this one is just about your TNR experience. Have you actually done TNR before? So do we have experienced folks in our audience? All right, more folks clicking along. It's looking to be about the same breakdown, which I guess isn't that bad. All right, so we're more at a 60-40 with this one rather than 2/3 to 1/3. So it looks like the majority of folks have in fact trapped before, which is fantastic. You're coming in with some experience of your own, some best practices, some tips that you've learned along the way. And then we have about, let's see, 40% that have not trapped, which is perfect. This is exactly what you're here for, right? To learn all about it. And so if you have trapped before, I hope that this webinar will be helpful to also offer some talking points. And so think of this as a great tool that you can use to go out and train other people in your community to help you out. And so whether you've trapped before or you're brand new, we have some information coming up, some best practices, some talking points. So whether you are seasoned or brand new, hopefully we got all the content that you will need. All right, so let's begin. First of all, I've mentioned, I think, this phrase a couple times now, but community cats. What do I even mean when I refer to community cats? So community cats describes any cat who lives outdoors. Now, lots of folks might refer collectively to any cat outside as a feral cat, but that's actually a misnomer. So feral actually refers to a behavior. It's a level of socialization. So when a cat is described as feral, it means that they are unsocialized. They are not adoptable because they are not socialized to people, and they are going to prefer to avoid humans altogether and live in their outdoor home. And so that's a truly feral cat. And honestly, the most and the truly 100% feral cats are probably cats that you will never see, because they are just going to live and thrive in their outdoor home. You might not even know they're ever there, and they're perfectly happy with that. Now, the cats that we see outside, however, are on a spectrum. Some, yes, are feral, but you'll have some that are more social, some that might rub against the legs of their caregiver and be very social or friendly to their caregiver, but still unsocialized to other people. Or you might run into cats that are completely fine with absolutely anyone that wants to pay them any attention, super social outside. They're happy out there, and they're happy that you're out there to come see them. You're going to find a little bit of everyone. And so collectively, we're going to refer to community cats as any cat who is outside. And then if I do use the word feral, please know that I am talking specifically about those scaredy cats, those cats who want nothing to do with people and are 1000% happier being outside than they are being in your home. Now, we all know that cats have lived outside, right? I feel like we can agree on this. Cats have always lived outdoors. It's not like someone was in their kitchen one day and cooked up a cat and then accidentally let it outside. That's not how it happened. Cats evolved or have always lived outdoors, and over time they settled down with humans and we kind of domesticated together. And so they have this long lineage, 10,000 years. And then here we are in 1946, we develop cat litter. And for the first time, cats can come indoors and lead an indoor only life. So let's think about that for a moment. We have 10,000 years or more even that cats have lived outside. And then in the very, very, very recent history, 1946, we invent cat litter. And really, it wasn't until the 50s or 60s when Tidy Cats came along and popularized the brand that, indoor only cats really came onto the scene. And so it's a very modern concept when you think about it like that. And so cats have always lived outside, and they have always thrived in their outdoor home. And so indoor only is a very new concept. And so when we're thinking about these community cats, thinking about them in their outdoor home, we know that we want to do something, but what should we do? Well, we know first, let's talk about what doesn't work. A lot of people might decide to do nothing because that seems like an okay solution, right? Just kind of ignore it, don't do anything. Maybe the cats will go away. Unfortunately, that doesn't tend to work. Doing nothing just kind of results in more cats and then more frustrations, and then you got a problem on your hands. Another method that we've seen is catch and kill, and that's kind of what I alluded to earlier in our presentation, and that's where cats are trapped and then removed from their environment. They're taken to the shelter, and because these cats, they love being outside, they are not happy inside, and so they are not candidates for adoption. They don't want to be lap cats. They don't want to be held and cuddled by humans. They're going to be fearful. And so in a shelter setting, that means they're going to be killed. And so that's what we mean by catch and kill, is when community cats are trapped, removed from their outdoor home, taken to a shelter where there just aren't any positive outcomes for them, and they're eventually killed there. So we know that doesn't work for a couple reasons, and we'll talk more about this on the next slide, but for something called the vacuum effect. And so for the same reason, the vacuum effect, relocation doesn't work. And that is coming in to trap, round up all these cats, and then we're going to try to put them somewhere else. We're going to move them from point A to point B because maybe point B is better. But the reality is, eventually, point B is going to fill up. There's only so many cats that you can put at point B. And do you have a C? How about a D? Maybe an E? All the way down to Z? How many places are there that you can relocate cats? Even barn homes or sanctuaries will have their maximum, and eventually you will run out of resources. It's honestly very traumatizing to the cats. It is a long, time-intensive process to do it correctly. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks in a relocation pen for them to really acclimate to their new environment, and even then, it is not a guarantee. Cats are territorial. They like to be where they are for a reason. They are in that place because it is their home, and they will travel to try to get back home even when you relocate them, even when you followed all those rules and done everything right. Some cats will still try to find their way home and can come across some danger in the process. And so another thing that we have seen implemented is ordinance. Some people think that by putting punitive ordinance in place that you're going to dissuade certain human behaviors that will make the cats go away. Things like feeding bans, and these are always an issue for many reasons. The first of which is that people are not going to stop feeding. So the caregivers that you have out there in the community, they're going to continue feeding, except now they're going to do it in the middle of the night, and now they're not going to be as vocal about finding spay-neuter resources or about finding the help they need to get these cat populations stabilized. And so now you're going to have people who are going to continue to feed, but nothing is being done in terms of TNR. And so all of these things do nothing to really help cats. They on the surface might seem great, but once you dig in and really think through, they're not going to make anyone happy, even the people who don't necessarily love that the cats are in the neighborhood. This is not going to help them at all. So I mentioned the vacuum effect, but what does that actually mean? And so when we're talking about catch and kill, and when we're talking about relocation, we're talking about going into an established colony, wherever the cats are, and moving all of them out of that space. Now, the vacuum effect describes this phenomenon that is recognized across all types of animal species, and that is the concept that a habitat is going to support a population of a certain size. And so no matter how many cats you might take out of a given area, because there are resources there, more cats will just move in to take on over. So whether it is a food resource or a shelter resource, even if you have a feeding ban and you think that you have removed those resources, odds are you haven't. There's another resource that you probably don't know about because cats are very, very resourceful. And so as long as those resources remain, which again, they're going to remain, the cats are going to continue to live in that colony site. And so I have this little diagram here. I'm not sure if this is helpful, but if you're a visual person, you can see on the top, we have that group of cats in that territory. They're going to be trapped, taken up and over and placed in the shelter there on the left where they are killed. And then that new batch of cats, those orange cats, are just going to come right in, fill that territory up until someone finally gets annoyed, calls animal control, and they come back, do the whole thing again, just 6 months after they've already come in and done it the first time. Versus down there on the bottom, you have that group of blue cats, and they're going to go up, and instead of going to the shelter, they're going to go in to the veterinarian for their spay or neuter. They're going to be ear tipped, vaccinated, and then they get to go right back out and they get to hold that territory. And so now they're going to be in that space. Animal control isn't going to have to come back to worry about these cats 6 months from now. They're going to be all happy and not reproducing. They're going to be vaccinated. They're going to be better behaved. And we'll talk about all that in a moment. And ultimately, everyone's going to be happier. All right, so here it is. We've talked a lot about trap-neuter-return, but what exactly is it? It's the method by which entire colonies of community cats are humanely trapped, spayed or neutered, vaccinated, ear-tipped, and returned to their outdoor homes. And so that's the whole process in a nutshell. And so we want to make sure they're trapped, get them to the vet, and then we're going to bring them right back to where they are. And now an important distinction here, folks, is that it is trap-neuter-return. What we don't want to do is recruit. And so it is trap-neuter-return. We're putting those cats right back outside. And so I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to recruit those cats for adoption and then overwhelm ourselves with adoptable cats. We don't want to relocate those cats. And then best of all, we're not just recruiting cats for an adoption or foster program that we don't have the resources to support in the long term. And so I am very big on clarifying that language. It is trap-neuter-return, making sure that all cats are returned right back outdoors to the home where they were already living and thriving. Now, I mentioned the ear tip, and especially those of you who haven't trapped before, I'm not sure if you have seen an ear tip in person, but you can see here on the screen, this guy here, the very tip of his left ear, you'll notice, has been removed. It was painlessly removed while he was still under anesthesia during his neuter surgery, and he is now easily identifiable at a distance that he has been through that process, that he is already been neutered, he's been vaccinated, he is good to go. And so when you have a feral cat or a community cat, especially a feral cat, it is very hard to come up close to them and try to look for a tattoo or to search for a space scar, right? That's nearly impossible with community cats. And so that's why we've come up with the ear tip as a solution. And so it's a great way to identify which cats have been through the process and which cats still need to be trapped. Now, again, it is painless. The cats don't even know it's gone. It is just the tip of the left ear that is removed during surgery. All right, so again, we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but this is a fun statistic to keep in mind as well, especially for those of you who are looking for some more talking points to support why Trap-Neuter-Return is the most humane and the most publicly supported form of control for cats, and that is our Harris poll. And so we know through this poll, this Harris Interactive poll from 2017, that 84% of Americans would prefer that their community use tax dollars to adopt sterilization as its policy instead of bringing cats to shelters. And so that is by far the majority of folks. And then when you think about it in terms of talking to your elected officials, that's the voter base. That is the people who are deciding who gets to sit in office and who doesn't. And so this is a great statistic to bring to elected officials who are wondering what their constituents are really thinking about their community tax dollars. And so in addition to that statistic, we have these talking points for you as well. And so first off, I think probably the most obvious is that once you start spaying and neutering cats, we know that you're going to stabilize the colony. And so in Washington, D.C., we know that a colony was stabilized and eventually reduced to zero in just 7 years after the program started. Only 6 cats were left in an alley of what originally had 54 cats. And so in just 7 years, 7 years, a colony of 54 cats dropped to just 6 cats. And that's pretty incredible when you think about the results of that. And when you think about doing nothing over implementing something like Trap-Neuter-Return, I think you'll see that the results are very, very different. Now, fun fact, that's actually the colony that started it all for us. That's that colony Becky first walked through in Adams Morgan in the Washington, D.C. area and got Alley Cat Allies started. Now, we also love Trap-Neuter-Return because it improves the individual cats' lives. They are no longer going to be experiencing the stresses of mating and pregnancy. If you've ever seen a cat go into heat, you know that it's not pretty. So by eliminating those wants, those needs, the cats aren't going to be looking for a date on Saturday night. And so that will be a huge health benefit for them. And then of course, we're providing that vaccination as well as part of the TNR program. And so when I talk about vaccinations, I mean especially the rabies vaccination. And then we also do the FVCRP, FVRCP. I think I confused my letters there. Please excuse me, but we are talking at the bare minimum, we want that rabies vaccination because that is a public health victory for the community. Like you see here on this slide, because not only are we helping cats, but we're helping our neighbors and we're helping our community as well. Because while the cats won't have to bear the brunt and the stresses of that mating and pregnancy process, there are also not going to be new litters of kittens. And so you're not going to see this influx of kittens in the neighborhood. You're not going to be walking to work one day, find a kitten in the bush and go, oh no, my whole day's ruined because now I have to figure out what I can do with this kitten. And so fewer kittens equals happier community. And it's easier for cats and humans to coexist because they're not going to be yowling and fighting and spraying. Those behaviors are virtually eliminated when you implement spay-neuter and bring trap-neuter-return into the colony. And then ultimately, you're going to help the cats blend in because we're going to eliminate those negative behaviors. We're going to, and we'll talk about this later, but part of TNR is we're going to talk about colony care. So we're going to make sure that they have clean feeding stations, that they have shelters to hide in, and that they're just going to be better neighbors overall. And then finally, we love TNR because it improves shelter outcomes. So animal shelters were designed with adoptable animals in mind. And so they were really put into place to get cats and dogs into loving homes. But like we talked about earlier, community cats don't necessarily want to be in a home. That's not what is comfortable for them. And so while I am very happy chilling on the couch and watching some Netflix, I would also be miserable going camping. That's just not my style. I've never been. However, community cats love camping. That is totally their jam. They're not going to be as happy sitting on the couch watching Netflix with me. So again, just to reiterate that, community cats love being outside. The shelter is not the place for them. And so by implementing TNR, you're diverting those cats away from the shelter, which means there are fewer animals entering the shelter, which means that intake goes down, which means staff has more time to focus on the adoptable animals that are already in their care. So you're going to have a staff that is less overburdened, that now has more time for the animals that can find a loving home. You have cats that can be spayed and neutered and returned to the home they already love. And then, of course, without kittens, we're going to see, we're not going to overburden shelters with influxes of kittens upon kittens upon kittens. As if anyone's ever been around a shelter during kitten season, or for those of you who have kitten season year round, you know how stressful that can be. Kittens, especially neonatal kittens, require a lot of resources and time and care and just all the things that they need to survive and thrive. And kittens can be very stressful on your shelters. And so by stabilizing the population, by limiting the number of new kittens born, we're all together going to have a happier animal shelter staff. And that means we're going to see even better outcomes for every single animal in that shelter. And so one of the questions that I get a lot, and so I wanted to add this slide just to kind of head it off at the pass, is do I need an ordinance? You know, is it legal to do TNR where I am? And the answer is you don't. You usually do not need an ordinance just to do trap-neuter-return. There are, you know, the rules from community to community do vary. We have a great website at alleycat.org/catsinthelaw that kind of walks you through understanding your local ordinances and where to find that information so you can understand more about what is already on the books, what is already in play, where you are specifically. Of course, we can't say blanket across every community, here's what it is. Everyone is a little bit different, but that Cats in the Law resource will be very helpful in helping you kind of find that information for yourself. And then if you are perhaps interested in implementing an ordinance for one reason or another, we have resources to help you with that too. And so I recommend checking out alleycat.org/advocacy toolkit. That will walk you through the process of ordinance change, of advocating. I believe we have some template and model language in there for you to use. Again, you don't need an ordinance to do TNR, but if you think that your community would benefit from having an ordinance on the books, we do have that resource for you as well. Now, we're going to walk through the steps of Trap-Neuter-Return, the actual step-by-step guide of how to do it from start to finish. And so you see here, we have this as a printed resource. I don't know that I added it to your handouts here, but it's certainly available online. And it's also available in the shop if you would like to buy the printed booklet. But all the information is on our website as well. And so I believe if you go to alleycat.org/TNR, you can find this guide all on our webpage for free. And so we're going to walk through this book, starting with creating a plan. And so like anything, an ounce of prevention, what is that old saying? We got to make sure that we put all the right plans into place before we actually do the actual trapping, because we want it to go off without a hitch, right? So step one is we have to talk to our neighbors. We want to make sure they understand what we're doing, and that way they can ask any questions they might have ahead of time. They can voice any concerns they might have. And now they're going to know that you're the person they should talk to if they have any questions in the future about those cats. And so like we said in the beginning, the cats need you to be their voice. Well, here you are. You're stepping up. You're introducing yourself to your neighbors as the resource for these cats in the community. So hopefully they know they can call you before they try to call animal control or someone else. And so also by communicating with neighbors, they might also keep in mind that they should keep their own cats indoors on trapping day unless they want a free trip to the vet. That's a fun thing that we've come across as well. And so in this, again, you're really using this opportunity to talk about the work that you're doing, give them a heads up of when you're trapping, but you can use this time to allay any concerns or fears and kind of build a bridge to your neighbors to ensure that everything remains very positive. Even if they don't like the cats, maybe they'll hear you out. All right, and next is we want to establish a feeding schedule, and we will talk more about feeding as you can see up there in the next step, but we're putting it here because it's really important to leave at least 2 weeks in your schedule or in your planning to create this schedule. We ideally want to get the cats into a routine. That way we know the cats are going to be showing up at the same time every day, and that way on trapping day, you know exactly when they're going to show up to eat, and that takes a lot of the mystery out. And so once you get the cats on the same schedule, say you're feeding them at 7 a.m. every morning, once you're ready to trap, you're going to set your traps and be ready to go at 7 a.m. The cats will show up, and it's going to make trapping so much easier. And so, pardon me, we will talk a bit more about that in a moment. But next, we really want to know who we're working with. And so we want to count and track the cats. You want to make sure that you have enough traps for all the cats that you are going to be trapping. You want to know who exactly is in the colony. You want to keep as detailed records as possible. And we have a great resource to help you with that. That is alleycat.org/tracking. We really recommend that tracking form for a few reasons. But again, you want to make sure on trapping day that you're getting all the cats that you anticipate. And next, it is really, really helpful to have on hand the medical records of all the cats. And so you'll have right there at your fingertips whether they've been spayed or neutered, when they were vaccinated, and you never know when you might need that information, especially might need it very quickly. And so best to keep all of that written down someplace. And then of course, we're going to want to schedule our veterinary appointments. Most vets don't really appreciate a bunch of community cats coming in traps as a walk-in, right? You want to give your vet a heads up. And so most vets who work with community cats and they do these spay-neuter programs, they understand that on trapping day, you might not get everybody that you hope to get. But if you are intending to go out there with 5 traps, go ahead and make 5 appointments. Even if you only end up catching 2, at least you have space for all 5 cats. And vets are typically very familiar with that. So that's not going to be a problem on their end. And make sure that you're talking to your vet in advance about the things that you do and don't want. Make sure they know that you definitely want all those cats ear-tipped. Make sure you know that you want them to be vaccinated against rabies. And then we also want to have a conversation about testing for FELV and FIV. We do not recommend testing for these, and there's a lot of reasons. And honestly, there is a lot of new research and protocols coming out, but ultimately, it's a test that is just diverting resources away from where they can be better applied. As long as a cat is healthy, it looks like it is thriving in its outdoor home, it's not symptomatic, we don't need to test for FELV and FIV. We know that those tests can yield a lot of false positives. And we're just learning a lot more about these two diseases. And so we do have information on our website at alleycat.org/FELV-FIV, and that will give you more information on what has informed that recommendation for us and kind of where we are coming from. We also have our link there at the bottom of your screen to find feral friends, which is a great way to identify those veterinarians who are in your area that are working with community cats. And then if your veterinarian happens to have questions about any step of this process, we have protocols and recommendations available for them as well. We have a whole veterinary resource library for them. And so they can go to alleycat.org/veterinarian for everything from our protocols on ear tipping, our protocols for a spay-neuter clinic, what to look for in recovery, what they might need as far as equipment in their surgical suite, all those sorts of questions we have answered. And so if you want to provide information for your own vet or you want to find a new vet, here are the links you might need. All right, and so we got to keep on planning, and that means we have to plan for the unexpected. And so that would be our injured and our sick cats. You want to make sure that you have the number of an emergency vet if you are going to be trapping after hours, that make sure you know where you're going to be taking any cats you might come across who are in a more dire situation. Make sure you know in advance what you want to do with a cat that is more socialized. And now I referenced this earlier, but we do recommend that even if a cat appears to be social, that you put him through the same TNR process as anyone else. Socialized cats can live and thrive outside, especially if you're finding these cats and they look healthy and they look happy. So just because they're social doesn't mean they have to be removed from the colony. Those guys can be a part of the TNR program just like anyone else. I also want to talk about nursing mother cats. I know this is a concern for some folks, but if you trap a cat and later learn that she is nursing, it is okay to go ahead and spay her. She will continue to lactate. However, you should note that you will want to return her back to the colony as soon as you can. You'll want to keep an eye out for kittens. Now, hopefully you've been monitoring the colony. What ideally we recommend is during this planning period, during this 2 weeks when you're getting the cats on a feeding schedule and you're counting and you're tracking everybody, we want you to keep an eye out for those cats who are pregnant or those cats who are nursing. And if she has very, very young kittens, we would recommend holding off for a little while until those kittens are weaned before you trap. However, we know that not every situation is ideal. Sometimes you don't know she's nursing. Sometimes you don't know there are kittens. You don't know exactly how old they are. Surprises always happen. And so it's always good just to think these things through and have a plan in advance. The same thing goes for cats you trap who turn out to be pregnant. And so, again, this is something where we advise folks to kind of follow what you believe to be best. However, Alley Cat Allies does suggest that you go ahead and you spay or consider spaying pregnant cats. There are a lot of kittens already out there in the sheltering world, and we know this can be a difficult decision, and we're not saying one thing or another, but just make sure that you have that in mind as a potential contingency. All right, next up is we want to assemble our trapping kit. And so you can see here the list on the right side of your screen. Of course, we're going to need traps, and make sure you have traps for everyone in the colony that you want to trap, or at least as many traps as you can fit into your car. You're going to want to have newspaper, utensils, trap covers, gloves, vehicle liners. And so especially as you're transporting cats, you know, these traps are just the cages, right? And so if you have a scared cat in your car and he happens to pee, you're going to want to make sure you have a liner down on the bottom of your car. What I really recommend is something like maybe like the puppy pad or the piddle pads that will be something like absorbent that will stop it from seeping into your car, but also absorb. Just keep in mind if you use a tarp, that pee might just run right off the tarp, which is not what anyone wants, right? Just some pro tips, speaking from experience here. Also recommend having a flashlight And of course, bring a friend. Trapping buddies are always encouraged. That helps the time go by faster, and it also can just be a bit safer to have someone with you depending on where you're trapping or how familiar you are with that area. And of course, bring your patience, because trapping is not always an exact science. You never quite know when that cat's going to decide to get into the trap. And so bring a lot of that patience along with you on trapping day. All right, and next thing we need to consider is where are we going to be holding and recovering our cats? So before we get them to the vet and then after they come home. And so depending on your schedule and your vet schedule, you might be able just to trap and take them right there. I know that I tend to trap early in the morning, so by the time I'm done, the vet clinic has just opened and I can go drop them off right away. However, if you're trapping in the evening or whatever your schedule might be, you're going to want to make sure you have a place to hold all the cats. Same thing goes for recovery. And now we do recommend, we're going to talk about this again, but we do recommend a 24-hour period for recovery. And so you're going to need somewhere for those cats to be. It should be temperature controlled, especially in the recovery process. As cats are recovering from anesthesia, they aren't able to regulate their body temperature. So ideally you want a room that's around 72 to 75 degrees. I know that I have used my bathroom as a recovery. I have a half bath, I should say, and I've used that bathroom for recovery. I know of people that have used their mud rooms or garages, as long as you can control the temperature and it won't be too hot or too cold. So that is just something to plan in advance. And then again, you want to think of transportation. So how many traps can you fit into your car? Is that enough? Do you need to find a buddy that has a car that you can fit a couple more traps into? What is it going to take to get all those cats where they need to go? And so again, it's helpful to have a buddy, both for the extra car and the extra set of hands lifting and moving all these cats around. And just making sure that you have every single box here checked, that we've done all the planning we've got to do. All right, so the planning process feels like a lot. There's a lot to consider as we're getting ready to trap. However, we're ready to move into the actual trapping process. I hope you're ready. So like I said, we want to feed at the same time every day. And now this is a real pro tip for you. Folks, if you've trapped before, maybe you know this, but especially for you folks who have never trapped, if you have access to the box traps prior to trapping day, so let's say that I'm planning to trap on a Friday, but it's Monday. If I have access to the trap, I'm going to put that trap out and I'm just going to tie it open and I'm going to start feeding the cats out of the trap. So I'm putting their food in that trap. Now it's not set. It is just tied open, and so they can freely come in, they can eat, they can go, this is great. I can come in here and just get a great snack, and I can leave. They're going to love it. And then one day on trapping day, they're going to walk in, and it won't be so easy to get out. And so it just kind of gets them used to the trap, and it kind of takes some of that mystery out of it. So that's a pro tip. It's not something that's required, but it's something we like to recommend if you have the ability. Now, and this is a best practice for feeding in general, not just for TNR, but in community cat or colony care in general. We recommend feeding for 30 minutes. You want to put the food down, and then after 30 minutes, you're going to pick it up. And again, that's getting the cats used to being there at a very specific time. And so they're going to know that if they want breakfast, they're going to have to show up between 6:30 and 7. And just like, you know, if my favorite restaurant changes the hours and suddenly I can't get brunch, but I can show up for lunch, you best bet that I'm going to learn what the new hours are and I'm going to be there at the right time. And so cats are the same way. And so you're going to go ahead and get them on a schedule. They're going to figure out what the new schedule is and they will show up. And again, you want to get them into that routine so that on trapping day, we know exactly when they're going to show up and we know that they are going to show up because, hey, it's breakfast time. All right, so again, you want to get them into that routine, and typically that's about a 2-week process. All right, so we have our cats on a feeding schedule. They're getting fed at the same time every day. We're putting food down and we're picking it up after 30 minutes. We're not leaving food out all day for them to just graze and come and go as they please. You can feed whatever your schedule might be, whether you feed once a day or twice a day. Every caregiver has a slightly different schedule, but just making sure that you are feeding on that same schedule, whatever it might be. Now we're moving into trapping. Here it is. Woohoo! We've done a lot of planning. We've done a lot of prep work. We've gone through our 2-week feeding schedule. Now that we've put all of that into place, trapping day is going to go so much more smoothly. So within or before we trap, the 24 hours before we trap, we are going to withhold food. And there are a couple reasons for that. And part of that is that we want the cats to be very hungry. Again, we want to know that we are going to get those cats into traps. That's the goal. And so we want them to be hungry enough to go into those traps so that we can get them to the vet. But also, just like humans going into surgery, you have to fast, right? You don't want to go into surgery with a full belly. It's going to interact with the anesthesia and whatever other drugs they might have to use along the way. And so for the same reasons, we want to make sure that we withhold food for 24 hours, making sure those cats are nice and hungry. Now, please do continue to provide water. They can drink as much as they want. We just want them to be hungry. All right, now counting traps might seem like a really simple concept, but it's also really important because especially when you're trapping multiple cats or large numbers of cats, you want to make sure that you are leaving with the same number of traps you came with. And so we definitely recommend writing down exactly how many traps you have, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally leave and you've left one trap behind and there's a cat that's been trapped and you have forgotten all about it. And so that's the last thing we want. And so especially if you're doing a larger project, we really recommend writing down the number of traps. I have even done it where I make a little map of the property. Now, I am not an artist, but as long as you can understand your system, that's what works. Draw yourself a little map, put an X wherever it is that you left a trap. Again, just trying to make sure that no one gets left behind. All right, and so we have counted our traps. We're withholding food. Now we want to prepare our traps. We know exactly how many we have, and now we're going to prepare them. And so this means each trap, we definitely recommend putting a label. I do believe that in your handout section, you have the template for our trap tag, or you have the link down there at your screen. And this is just a simple way to explain to people what you're doing. That way they know that if they see a cat in a trap, it's for a good reason. And hopefully they're not going to let that cat out of the trap because they are misinformed and don't know what you're doing. You're going to provide that information there on that little tag. You can even provide your phone number in case they want to call and ask questions. That template is a great resource. You can just download, print, and stick it on your traps. But then we're also, as we prepare our traps, we're going to lay some newspaper, or I've seen some folks use kind of like a thin cardboard, maybe like from a cereal box. Or we have even started using like a magnetic vent cover. You can buy them at like a Home Depot or similar kind of store. They're like the magnetic covers that kind of go over the air vents in your home. They're very thin, but so you can easily trim them. You can buy them pretty cheaply in like a pack of 5 or something. And you can actually trim those down and they lay at the bottom of the trap. They have a nice weight to them, so they're not going to blow around in the wind, but they're also thin. So ideally, we want, whenever the cat steps on that trip plate, we want to make sure that whatever we have covering the bottom of that trap is thin enough that it's not going to throw that off, right? So if you have something that's super thick laying over top, the cat could step on the trip plate and then nothing happens because you have something that's too thick. So that's the key, is you want to make sure that you have something lining the bottom of the trap, and that is it helps really protect the cat's paws, because if you're looking at this trap here on the screen, you can see it's kind of made of wire, and they do have coated traps now, which makes it a little softer, but you're still kind of standing on those grates all day long. And so the newspaper kind of helps provide a little bit of padding or protection for the cat's paws. And it's also double action going to make cleanup that much easier. So these cats are going to be in the traps for at least a day. So you know that there might be a little mess involved. And so this will help make cleanup easier for you. Now we want to bait our traps. So when we are baiting our traps, the key thing is to make sure we place the bait all the way behind the trip plate. And so when you're actually working with the trap, you'll see the little plate that comes up, that trip plate. We'll want to make sure that we put the bait all the way behind it so that the cat actually has to step on that plate in order to get the food, because we need them to step on the plate in order to trip the door to close, right? And so the last thing we want is a cat to get in the trap, get so far back, and then the food isn't back far enough so they're able to get in, eat, have a great breakfast, and then leave. The worst thing is when you see a cat get in the trap and then leave again. Am I right? All right. So as far as what kind of bait to use, I've seen caregivers honestly use all different kinds of things. What you see here is tuna in oil, because that oil is going to make sure that it's nice and stinky. I mean, it's nice. Cats are going to get a whiff of that and they're really going to enjoy it. Hopefully they're going to want to go in that trap, and the oil makes sure that it doesn't freeze in the wintertime or dry out in the summertime. However, pardon me, I also know caregivers that have had success with things like fried chicken. I've even had a caregiver say he just uses dry food and manages to catch, to trap his entire colony just using dry food. And you might have to get creative. Some cats in your colony might like the tuna, some cats might prefer the chicken, and some cats might just be basic and like that dry food. And so no one bait works for 100% of cats, right? Just like people, they have their own unique personalities, they have their favorite things. And so you might have to try a couple different baits out. Again, you have tuna, you have just regular wet food. You can get creative with things like anchovies and chicken. Whatever you do, just keep trying different things to see what works best for your cats. And so here what you see again is they're placing the bait at the very back of the trap. And then if you want to entice the cat from the very beginning, what you can do is at the opening of the trap, maybe put a little bit of food right there at the opening so they get just a nice taste. And then you can drizzle some of that oil or whatever you might be using. Drizzle some of that and create a line all the way to the back. So you're kind of leading the cat from the very opening of the trap all the way to the back, where they will step on that plate and they will be trapped. All right, so once we have the traps prepared, they are baited, now we have to figure out where they go. And so key here is to make sure that the traps are on level ground. We don't want them to be rocking back and forth, right? We know that cats can be kind of skittish, and if something doesn't seem sturdy or safe, they're not going to go in. So you want to make sure that your trap is set on the ground and isn't rocking back and forth, nice and sturdy. You can place them in the areas where cats are already used to eating. And so, for instance, if you feed on your back deck, you can go ahead and set the traps on your back deck. Or maybe you have to think more like a cat. Maybe you have some guys that are a little suspicious of that weird looking thing that you put the food in this morning. And so they're going to hang out in the bushes, and maybe while you're not looking, they'll give it a go. So again, just like with the baits, every cat is a little bit different. So you might place some on your deck, you might place some in the bushes, you might place some in the middle of your yard. You might have to try a couple different things out just to see what will work for each cat in your colony. But again, wherever you do place them, especially if you're working with multiple traps in a larger colony, I would make yourself a little map or a key so you remember exactly where they are. And then I also want to talk about covering them. And so once a cat is in the trap and they're fully in the trap, we want to make sure that they are fully and completely covered. And so you can use a towel, you can use a sheet, whatever it is, as long as it from end to end covers the cat. They cannot see out. You can see this guy here on your screen. He looks a little alarmed, right? But as soon as we go over and we're going to pull that trap cover down over him, and it's going to really help calm him down. in this, and especially if you get a cat in a trap and he seems to be thrashing around, it's not uncommon. It can be very scary for these cats. And so by covering that trap, however, you're going to be limiting his field of vision. You're going to give him a nice kind of closed off place to feel much more safe in. And so it really will keep the cats more safe because they're not going to be thrashing around as much. And it's going to help keep them calm. And now you can kind of preset the cover. And so whenever you're placing the traps around your property, you can go ahead and get that towel, get that sheet, kind of partially cover the trap or even fully cover the trap. Again, you might have to play around with this depending on the cat, but you can have that cover kind of preset. And so once you hear that trap close, you can come on over and just throw that cover right on over. Now, that's not to say that you might not have a cat that would prefer the trap in the middle of the field with absolutely no cover at all, and you have to wait until they are fully in the trap before you walk on over and then you cover the trap. Again, every cat is a little bit different. These are just different ideas for you, especially, but the key here is for every single cat, once they are in that trap, we are going to cover them, and we are going to keep them covered. All right, so we have trapped our cats. We have set them, we've trapped them, we've covered them, and now we're going to transport them either to our home if we have to hold them before we go to the vet, or we're going to go straight to the vet. And so that's where you find your trapping buddy and you find your transportation, whether it's your car or someone else's, and you're going to transport those cats. Now, of course, prior to surgery, they're going to be alert. They're going to be themselves. Once you go and you get them from the vet post-surgery, now your vet might hold them, you know, depending on whether you're going to a high volume clinic and maybe they can't hold them as long, or maybe you have a vet that's willing to hold the cats overnight. And so this may or may not be something that you need to worry about, but immediately post-surgery, of course, the cats will be waking up from their anesthesia. And so they are going to be groggy. And then just some things to look out for are bleeding, vomiting, difficulty breathing, and then especially not waking up. And so these are kind of the more obvious signs that something is wrong, in which case you need to call your veterinarian or get those cats right back to the veterinarian. And so again, some vets will hold cats and do this kind of monitoring for you, but this is good information to have just the same. Now, we are going to hold cats for 24 hours. I do not recommend any more than 24. Some folks have asked me if you need to hold females longer than males, or if she's had a certain kind of flank spay, do I need to hold her longer? And the answer is no. 24 hours is the best practice, because ideally we want the cats to get back home where they can be most comfortable. If anyone has ever been in the hospital to recover, you'll know that it can be very stressful. It's a weird environment, there's weird sounds, and yeah, I guess you might be recovering, but nothing helps you get back to health better than being in your own home, sleeping in your own bed. That's when you're really going to make those big strides towards recovery. And so that's why we like to get cats through that first 24 hours, and then we're going to return them right back home where we know they're going to be less stressed and therefore able to recover much more quickly. And so once the cats, after that 24 hours, the cat should be awake, alert, and they're going to look ready to go. So I'm going to play this video for us here. Hopefully it plays well on your end, but this is a fun little return video, kind of a compilation of some of the returns that we've done. I like this guy. He's like, wait, the door's open. Very excited to be back. You'll see some cats aren't quite ready to leave, and some cats cannot get out of there quick enough. But the return is always my favorite part of any trapping project, because you know that you've made such an impact in their lives and that it's only going to get better and better from there. Oh, look at that cute face, right? Look at him rocking that ear tip. All right, so we've done our TNR. We've watched those cats go back home. We know that they're going to have a great future ahead of them. So we're all done, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, TNR doesn't end when the cats are returned, because usually there are more cats to trap in the colony. Even if you got everyone the first time around, you want to make sure that you continue monitoring the colony, and if anyone new happens to show up, that's the perfect time to go ahead and get them trapped as well, get them spayed and neutered and returned right back to their colony. And so you want to continue to monitor, provide food, water, medical care when needed. If you have cats in the colony who weren't easy to trap, cats who didn't go for the process that we just described, these are the hard to trap cats, and so they are the trickier ones to get to the vet. And so what you can do is, there are a few options. We have our website at alleycat.org/hard to trap. What you see on your screen here is a drop trap, or what I often describe as the Looney Tunes approach to trapping cats. As you can see, it's a kind of a box trap that's propped up there on that U-shaped PVC pipe attached to a string. And so this string lets you kind of back up and stand far off and away. Just like the box trap, we're going to put some food under there and hopefully entice that hard to trap cat will come wandering under our box trap. And when we see that they're in just the right position, we're going to pull the string and the box will fall. And then there's usually a door built into the drop trap that will allow you to kind of line up a transfer cage or a trap so that you can get the cat from the drop trap into the transfer cage or whatever you are using to ultimately get them to the vet. So this is one example of something you can do with a cat that is a bit more trap savvy. And we have more advice on our website and ideas of what you can do. Now, I believe that establishing good community relations is one of the best ways to ensure the ongoing safety of the cats in your colony. You've done all this work to get them on a good schedule, and you're continuing to feed in, make sure they have water, you've gotten them spayed and neutered, you've done all this great work, and the last thing you want is for someone to go ahead and call animal control anyway. Like we said in the beginning, we want to establish ourselves as the resource for cats. We are their voice. And so here, we really want to position ourselves as the resource. We want to let people know that they can call us if something comes up or if someone has a question. We do have our website, alleycat.org/community relations, which really has a number of resources that you might find helpful when it comes to networking or educating your community. We have information there specific to property managers, specific to negotiating, a lot of great topics there. And so I definitely recommend you kind of bookmark that page, community relations, for some quick bullet points and advice for different types of community situations. And so one of the cool things about being the resource for cats means that when people come to you with a problem, that you are positioned to offer a solution. And so it's going to happen where folks aren't thrilled that cats are on their property, or that the cats are doing something which doesn't align with what they were hoping. And so those folks should have a voice. Just like anyone in the community, they deserve to be heard. And so if they don't want cats sitting on their car, you should hear them out, and maybe you provide them with a car cover. If they don't want cats digging in their garden, there are things we can offer to deter that behavior. And so these slides are our humane deterrence. Now in your handouts, I know I attached the brochure on how to live with cats in your community. And that's also, again, available online at the link on the bottom left hand of your screen. But these are some of the tips that we recommend. So as it turns out, a lot of cats don't like the smell of citrus. And so an easy way to keep them out of gardens is to use citrus rinds. And you can either just, I've seen it done a couple ways. You can kind of scatter the rinds into the soil directly. I've seen folks where they kind of put all those rinds together into like a cheesecloth and kind of bury it in the soil. Again, you might have to try different things, just seeing what works in that specific area, but you can use things like citrus to keep cats out of a given area. I had a coworker who actually discovered her cat was playing with a clementine, happened to think that it was a toy. He was a kitten, and the juices sprayed out of the clementine, and he ran away like immediately. And so she actually now uses citrus to keep the cats off her counter. So she'll just spread out some clementines on her countertop, and the cats see that, and it's enough to keep them from ever jumping on her counter. I can't say that will work for anyone or everyone, but that was just a fun story she used to tell me. You can also use used coffee grounds. So much like the citrus, this is something that you can spread in the soil. And not to mention, coffee grounds are great for gardens, and they're available pretty much anywhere. You can usually walk into any Starbucks or McDonald's. Those kinds of places typically save their used coffee grounds for people who are composting. And so you can typically walk into those places and get some used coffee grounds for free. So just some ideas for you. If there is something going through the trash cans, more often than not, if something's going through your trash cans, it's probably the raccoon. They have those handy opposable thumbs. However, the cats do tend to take advantage of it. And so once the raccoons pop the lid off, the cats do come along looking to see what might be tasty. And so they tend to take the blame. And so if trash cans happen to be the problem, it's helpful to have things like bungee cords on hand. You can use white vinegar. Same thing for the garden. They don't like the smell, and so you can pour some vinegar in like a pie pan and kind of place that somewhere discreetly in the garden or whatever area it might be that you don't want the cats to be. And again, that smell should deter them. Now, these are things that have to be refreshed and replenished, but they're easily accessible. You know, you probably have citrus or coffee in your house, or at least someone nearby you does. And so those are pretty easy to obtain. Now, there are some more high-tech solutions. You see here on the left side of your screen, that is our Scarecrow. And that is, it's not ours, but it is called the Scarecrow. And the company that makes it, it is a motion-activated device, and it's hooked up to a hose. And so when it detects any kind of motion, it's gonna let off a quick stream of water. And obviously that's going to keep cats out of your yard. It will also keep things like deer and small children out of your yard as well. So that is a motion activated device with multiple uses. In the middle of your screen, that is what we call cat scat. And so it's this plastic kind of little spiny things that are designed to kind of blend in with the garden, but you can see they kind of have just these little tines that aren't going to hurt the cat in any way. They're not sharp, they're not going to puncture or anything, but they're just uncomfortable enough that the cat isn't able to dig in the garden. I've also seen like carpet runners, those clear plastic carpet runners. I've seen those used where you can turn them over so like the pointy side is up as a deterrent. And then over there on the right side of your screen is another motion activated device. This is the Cat Stop. It lets off a high-pitched sound that is only supposed to be audible to cats, though I have heard of a few small dogs that can hear it as well. So this is motion activated, specific for cats, and it's that sonar, that high-pitched kind of frequency that cats can hear. And again, those are positional, so wherever they're facing, they're going to pick up on whatever movement is there, let off this sound, and so anything that comes across its path is going to go ahead and run away, and they're going to learn not to go into those areas. And then you can also, this product on the bottom, it's called Shake Away. And so those are repellent granules that you can buy at any like Home Depot or Lowe's, any kind of store or garden store like that. And you can shake them over your garden. Again, they'll need to be refreshed and replenished, but they should do the trick. Just some different ideas, different things that you can offer to your neighbors. You know, if they vehemently don't want the cats there, then they don't need the cats there. And there are ways that we can work together and come to a solution that works for everybody. And so it's helpful to have these in your back pocket as a talking point. Now, as we continue to care for cats, it's important that we follow the best practices to make sure that we are caring for the colonies and that we're setting them up for success. And so I think I mentioned this earlier in our presentation, but we want to make sure the cats are good neighbors. We want them to blend in. And so ideally, we want them to be inconspicuous, you know, out of sight, out of mind. We don't want them to be seen as a nuisance, or we don't want their colony site certainly to be seen as a kind of trashy area. We want to make sure we keep it clean, pick up all all those bowls. We're not leaving paper plates all over the place. And then we're always feeding the appropriate amount of food on that set schedule, and we're always picking up after 30 minutes. We are not going to just open a bag of cat food, dump it on the ground, and then walk away, because when that happens, you're going to attract not only the cats, but wildlife and bugs actually will become a bigger issue. You will attract things like ants and flies, and it just becomes a whole big problem. We want to feed the cats, not the entire wildlife community. And so we're going to give just that amount on that set schedule for no more than 30 minutes. I do think in our handouts, again, I have the best practices PDF there for you to download and take a look at. And then we have those links there at the bottom of your screen, alleycat.org/colonycare. And I know it is the month of January, so if you are somewhere where it happens to get colder, we do have some tips for you through the winter, pardon me. I know a lot of folks are concerned about the cats being outside, but again, cats survive and thrive in all sorts of conditions. There are cats in Alaska that do just fine, thank you very much. But through the winter, there are some things we can do to help them out. And so for feeding them, we can go ahead and give them a little extra food. We can regularly provide fresh water. You can consider changing up your water bowl. If it's a nice deeper dish, it won't freeze as often. A deeper dish will take longer to freeze, and so you want to kind of think about the bowls that you're using, making sure they're ideal for the climate that you're in. We can provide winter shelters, or these shelters that are filled with straw that will help the cats have somewhere to go to get out of the elements and to keep warm. You can see our shelter gallery link there at the bottom for some examples of what those winter shelters will look like. And then you also want to do things like check your car, bang on the hood of your car before you get in and start it in the mornings. You never know what cat might have crawled in to kind of keep warm up against the engine of your car. You can think about the kind of salt you might be using to de-ice, and you can consider buying a pet-friendly de-icing salt. Just kind of think through those sorts of things. And we have, again, the link at the bottom of your screen for more winter tips. Now we're getting to the end of our presentation now, but I want to briefly mention our Wait Until 8 program. This is a really cool resource if you go to, I believe, alleycat.org/waituntil8. It is a program that shelters can use to empower communities to step up and help foster those kittens they might find outside. And so if someone walks in through the front door of a shelter and they have kittens that are under 8 weeks old, with our Wait Until 8 and our kitten care kit, they would be able to hand them this box you see here filled with everything that they would need, along with instructions on how to care for that kitten until they reach about 8 weeks old. And once kittens are 8 weeks or 2 pounds, they're old enough to be spayed and neutered, and at that point they can enter into the adoption track. So it's taking that weight off of the shelters and empowering the community to step up and kind of help with that responsibility of caring for those communities' kittens in this case. So the Wait Until 8 program is a really cool thing. You can check it out and maybe even recommend it to your shelter if they don't have something like that in place. So just to wrap it up, I'll let you start thinking of some questions. I see we've already had several come in over the course of our presentation here, but just to wrap it all up, through TNR, we know that the colony size is going to be stabilized. It's going to decrease naturally over time, and that the cats are going to be healthier. They're getting their rabies vaccination. They're not going to be looking for dates on Saturday night. We're going to relieve the overcrowding at our animal shelters, which is ultimately going to help every adoptable animal in the community. And ultimately, we're going to make sure that the cats, the neighbors, the animal shelters, everyone is at a win-win-win scenario, helping the community overall. And so I mentioned our webinars earlier. Here's just a look at a few of the other sessions. If you enjoyed today's presentation, which I hope that you did, you can check out these other webinar resources that we have for you. We do have the same webinar, but presented in Spanish. So I know some of you are tuning in from countries around the world. I saw a large contingent registered from Argentina. So if you guys are watching, thank you so much for being here. But we have this information in Espanol as well. All right, now on to your questions. You've all been waiting so patiently, and I thank you for that. So let me see here. Give me a moment. I was presenting and I wasn't able to quite read as closely as I wanted, so I'm going to read right here. Oh, do you microchip the cats under the program of TNR? Oh, great question. So we do recommend microchipping as a best practice, and we do have a lot of information on this, and I think we call it plan to scan. But you can probably find it at, I'm forgetting the direct link for you, but I know we have a lot of information, and we do recommend microchipping. It's a great way for people to keep track of the cats and where they go. And it's honestly, it's come in handy quite a number of times. However, we know that it can be cost prohibitive to certain groups. There are some great companies out there offering great discounts on microchips to folks who are involved in Trap-Neuter-Return. However, we know that money is scarce and that can be a real deterrent. And so we haven't officially put it in as any kind of standard practice. However, if you have the resources, we definitely recommend microchipping. And in that case, if it's a rescue that is doing the TNR, like if I'm a TNR group, I would recommend that the microchip stay registered to the TNR group. And so that way, if that cat's ever picked up, they can call the TNR group, and then you guys as the TNR group can track that cat down through your own records to know exactly who the caregiver is or where they belong. All right, reading some great. All right, so I see someone saying that kitten season used to be about once a year, then twice a year, and now more than twice a year. So it sounds like your kitten season has just continued to grow and grow. And so I'm wondering if you guys are doing TNR where you are. If not, I definitely recommend that you implement some TNR and see if you can cut down on kitten season. All right. And so I have a question here on whether or not we have a webinar on how to move kitties if you happen to move to another address. And so we don't necessarily have a webinar on that, but we do have information on relocation. And I do want to just say out there that relocating cats, again, it's not a 100% guarantee. And so especially community cats, when you're relocating them, it is a time-intensive process, and it requires a very specific step-by-step in order to really set yourselves up for success. And so I recommend going to alleycat.org/relocation to get more on that process, and that's where you'll find everything you need. And I will also say that relocation should only ever be the last resort. At all costs, whenever possible, we want to leave cats exactly where they are. After all, they are there because of the resources that exist. And if we remove them from that area, new cats will move in. And so you might relocate some cats today, but you'll have to find homes and relocate cats again in about 6 months. And so really weigh your options. Every situation's a little different. So definitely check out alleycat.org/relocation and kind of think through every piece of that puzzle. So I have a question here on how to respond to folks who say things like they want the cats gone at all costs, or there are threats of poisoning or shooting cats. And so when you're coming across this in the community, and unfortunately it comes up more often than any of us would like, but we do have information on this on anti-cruelty, and I believe it's alleycat.org/anti-cruelty. And it is illegal to intentionally kill a cat in all 50 states, or shoot a cat in all 50 states, I believe. And there are things that you can do. And so I definitely recommend checking out our anti-cruelty page. Threats against cats should be taken very seriously. it should be something that you can get the police involved in. You should file a report with either animal control or your police. I mean, it is something to be taken seriously if you think cats are being harmed. And we do have a webinar on cruelty. Again, I forget the exact name. I apologize. It's been a little while, but we do have on that alleycat.org/webinar, we do have a presentation on cruelty. And so definitely check that out if you think cats are being harmed. Oh, can you go back to the kitten program? I'm sorry, I'll back up for you. All right, there we go. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, so let's see. I'm seeing a lot of questions, a lot of facts coming in. All right. Oh, thank you. You got your screenshot. Great. I'm glad that we went back to this. And if you needed more information on our kitten program, here you go. All right. And so I have time for about one more question. And where can I acquire a lot of traps for a cheap price? That is a great question. Traps can be kind of pricey. However, we do recommend reaching out to other groups in your community to see if you might be able to borrow traps. But we also have a page on our website, and that's alleycat.org/equipment. That lists out the trap providers that we know of. And if you reach out to them, and if you happen to be with a group, I know a lot of those companies are happy to work, especially with rescue groups. And, you know, depending on what the situation is, they might even be able to work with you on the pricing of that. And so that's alleycat.org/equipment. All right, folks, I do see that we are over our 90 minutes. Whew. We can fill a full hour and a half just talking about Trap-Neuter-Return. How cool is that? And here you are. I have you all still with me and listening. So hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. If you still have questions, you can get in touch with us at info@alleycat.org. You can also get your questions answered online at alleycat.org/get-help. I know you've heard me say it over and over, but I know we have a spot on our webpage, or if you go to alleycat.org/, but that's because we have a website that is full of information that is ready and waiting and is there to help you as an advocacy group. Our role is to provide education, training, and support, all to empower you, the individuals who are on the ground, part of this grassroots movement that we've been a part of for 30 years now. And we're looking forward to seeing where the next 30 years takes us. So thank you. I hope you found this to be helpful, and go out there and keep doing the good work and saving those cats. Thank you so much.